Now, the timing of Grant Wall's death and the still unclear causes behind it have roused suspicions in some circles, including from his brother, Eric Wall, who posted this emotional message on Instagram this weekend.
My name is Eric Wall. I live in Seattle, Washington. I am Grant Wall's brother. I am gay. I am the reason he wore the rainbow shirt to the World Cup. My brother was healthy. He told me he received death threats. I do not believe my brother just died. I believe he was killed. And I just beg for any help.
Joining us in studio for more is our Mideast correspondent, Alec Pollard. Alec, I want to be clear. We're not saying there's any evidence of anything suspicious of Grant Wall's death. His brother didn't actually offer any evidence of that. But again, people are asking questions just because of the circumstances here.
Definitely. Well, Grant Wall was already before his unexpected death, which shocked much of the soccer world and sporting world, even, as we saw there. Even LeBron James knew about him. He has a huge Twitter following, close to 1 million followers. He was already in the spotlight because of that incident where he wore the sort of a rainbow flag soccer shirt, where he wasn't allowed.
Right, a symbol of LGBTQ pride.
Right, also with his brother, who's gay, as he mentioned there, and in support of him as well. And he had a whole tussle there with the security guards.
Qatar.
And they said they ripped his phone away and so forth. He made a post about that on Twitter. Eventually was let in. So that was a big deal, sort of in the media, created a bit of a media storm even before this incident. We have to take into account that he was experiencing health issues before his death. In his podcast, he talked about that he was feeling unwell. He went to the treatment center there in Qatar. They diagnosed him with bronchitis. We don't know if that's what he had. Right. They diagnosed him with that. They gave him medical treatment. He said he was feeling a little bit better, but he certainly did seem to have some medical issues before. Again,
that doesn't rule out foul play, I should say, because we don't know, if there was involved, that could also be responsible for that.
It's true. We don't know. There's a lot of questions here. I think, though, more than sort of a grand kind of conspiracy theory regarding his death, which, is possible but seems more unlikely, this is still a very damning indictment of Qatar and sort of the lack of trust of various people watching on of the authorities. The fact that his brother thinks that he was killed. Also, he received apparently all kinds of threats because of his LGBT protests.
Right. His brother said that he did receive death threats. We produced him on social media and that kind of thing.
Right. And the fact that various other people came with other sort of LGBT markers were not allowed into the stadium, were bundled out of the stadium. People say they were treated violently by security guards whenever they were sort of breaking with specific protocols that the Qatari authorities didn't like. There was no consistency in applying these laws because Palestinian flags and Palestinian protests were allowed and even encouraged, while these type of protests were not. So certainly this just further emphasizes that story that happened to Grant Wall, where he went through that treatment by the authorities, his criticism of the World Cup in general and the treatment of migrant workers and all of that. It all sort of just brings all of that to the fore a little bit more, and the lack of trust of the authorities concerning his case is again a bit
stemming even before the World Cup, even with the circumstances in which they received it, because there have been corruption allegations, and some are in play now in Europe about whether there was either some kind of bribery involved or whatever, or undue influence in Qatar getting the World Cup. It was a controversial choice from the start.
Absolutely, a huge controversy that such a tiny country that has almost no stadiums and no infrastructure in order to host such a massive event was given it. It didn't seem to make sense to a lot of people at the time. A lot of people at the time knew that, knowing how labor is conducted in the Gulf and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and so forth, that in those heat conditions, this could mean the death of thousands of workers and so forth. There's tons of question marks surrounding Qatar in this World Cup. And obviously this case, which again seems most likely not to be some grand conspiracy case, still just sheds that extra light on Qatar and the lack of trust that various people have of Qatar's statements regarding various issues, including the death of Grant Wall.